to hear my opinion about your album.
Welcome to Unwarranted Music Opinions, a show in which three music fans choose an album, reconvene after listening to them, and discuss our feelings about them. I'm Jacob Lindberg. I'm here with Brian Courtney.
Hey.
And Chaz Jenkins.
What up, what up?
And this is a themed episode. It's scary albums.
Ooh.
Chaz, you can start us off.
So the album I picked is Dreamatorium by Death Cube K. Death Cube K is a side project from everyone's bucket-wearing, guitar-playing, chicken-loving dude.
No, it isn't.
Buckethead.
I didn't know that.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
Wow.
Yep.
Oh my God.
That's what we've been waiting for you
So to give everyone
find
some
out.
context, through the entire couple weeks that we've been planning this episode, me and Jacob kind of did this thing where we would see how long it would take Brian to realize that this is just another Buckethead project that we're doing on the podcast.
Hey, that's cool.
I've done Buckethead 2 times now, and I couldn't think of any other scarier music than Buckethead's work. And
Oh my fucking God, it's an anagram.
Yep, it is.
That's your passive investigation being very low.
Yeah. So like I said, Death Cube K is a side project from Buckethead. In the Buckethead lore, Death Cube K is his mirror opposite, where Buckethead is this good side, Death Cube K is the bad side.
But Buckethead murders people at an amusement park.
No, his characters do, not Buckethead himself.
But he orchestrates it. It's named after him.
Don't get too deep into the lore.
Shut up. We've learned from this. So anyway,
Hold on, I'm opening the wiki.
so Dreamatorium is the debut from Death Cube K. It came out in 1994. It's very similar, but kind of different from Buckethead's normal stuff. This is very dark, ambient drone music. Very like soundtrack to a B horror movie. You kind of mentioned that with Buckethead Land 2, but this is like the actual kind of music that would be that. Features Bill Lostwells. He actually made the album on his record label. Bill Lostwell plays bass on this, and it features other engineering and help production-wise from other people, but it features classic playing from Buckethead. To describe this album, I wouldn't say it's the scariest of the pick, as we'll get into it, but there's a lot to love about it, and I think, I just don't want to give into it. What did you guys think?
I was pleasantly surprised by this. I
Yeah,
really wasn't
same.
expecting much from it, but I felt like it was pretty unique as far as ambient goes, and I'm not an ambient expert, especially not a dark ambient expert.
Me neither. This is like the only music I've heard from it.
But I really liked how there was this kind of relaxing Drudy Collins style guitar work throughout the whole thing, and I feel like having that very expressive atmospheric guitar playing going on kind of quietly throughout a couple of the tracks here.
It's interesting because the tone of the guitar is a Buckethead staple, but this is one like from his discography that I know of where it started coming through, because if you recognize that playing, like Coleman came out like a couple years after this, that style of playing and sound is very heavy on that album. So this is like kind of like the beginnings of that.
I thought that having that in an ambient album gave it some character that it otherwise might not have had. The first track, Land of the Lost, is kind of this progressive electronic atmospheric track. The minimal guitar work is used, I think, really, really well. I think it works super well.
It's interesting it's called Dreamatorium. Like, that's kind of how I feel. Like, I just imagine these landscapes and characters walking, like in Land of the Lost, I just imagine like a warrior walking up a mountain, and it's just very quiet and ominous.
To me, it kind of reminded me of the darker parts of the Twin Peaks soundtrack a little bit. Mm-hmm. I think the whole 10 minutes go by without a hitch on that one.
Yeah, no, the first track's really good. It's crazy now that I have the context that is Buckethead, because I am like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Cause
What were you thinking about it not knowing that it was Buckethead? Did you just think of just some like...
I thought it was good, honestly. Like, I was a little, like, I wouldn't say blown away, but like, I would say I was
pleasantly surprised.
I was taken aback. I was like, hey, this is really solid. Like, it's even pretty good at points. Like, Map of Impossible Worlds is like a really solid song, and Terror by Night
riff.
Terror by Night is one of the very few, because scary is, the theme is sort of a backdrop. Terror by Night is like legitimately one of the scarier songs that we actually got to listen to this week.
Yep.
Of all of
And
those
it really
songs.
comes out of nowhere.
But it comes in at such a solid moment. You have these dreary, very ominous riffs and playing and atmosphere, and then when Terror by Night's hit, if you notice, it's the same rhythm as the robots. It's so similar if you listen back to it, but it's just so garbled and industrial and like...
Yeah, you can barely tell the guitars are guitars.
You can barely tell it is a guitar.
Guitars? Are they synths? And I love the fact that it kind of seems improvised a little bit, and it seems like sometimes he finds a riff he likes, and he just pounds it, and he does it over and over and over, and it gets to the point where it's aggressive and unsettling when he finds this like riff where the guitar is just being battered while he's just doing it over and over and over.
It's such a good check mark.
It sounds so warped that it just sounds angry and relentless.
So the worst track is Dark Hood, of course. And
there are only 5 tracks here, to be clear.
I think the album should have
fifth
ended
of
with
the album?
Maggot Dream because we have such a great build-up that when Terror by Night hits, then ends with Maggot Dream, it would make more sense thematically. You know, like you have this scary nightmare
and
to
Maggot
the
Dream is like a tribute to Maggot Brain because it sounds super similar.
It's so beautiful.
Like it has that little guitar line that goes throughout the whole thing like Maggot Brain does, and then it has that like very soulful solo being the entirety of the track like Maggot Brain does, but it's its own thing.
Yeah, and of course Buckethead's playing is stellar, you know, as it usually is going to be.
Got to talk about Map of Impossible Worlds though, because we went over that one.
I can't praise it enough how that acoustic riff just
it is repetitive in the best way possible.
Right. It gets me in like a kind of a Kraftwerk kind of way.
It's entrancing.
Yeah,
and
it's really
I
good.
imagine like camels just trekking the dunes when I listen to that, you know, to a pyramid.
It's a really nice finger-picked guitar bit. It fully explores everything that it can without becoming like too much, too flashy.
Breezy 7 minutes.
Yeah, it absolutely justifies
Dark
the length.
Hood. So you probably guys don't like this track.
I don't hate it. I don't
hate it either
yeah.
because I'm used to it. As a true Buckethead fan, this is classic when Buckethead's just fucking around.
Yeah.
He goes in the studio, he's like, all right, put down an hour-long ambient, you know, forest sound, whatnot. Give me some ambient chords. All right. And he just does that for 12 minutes. That is like...
I honestly didn't mind it. Like, I think it's fun. Like, I should have hated this, but really, I don't mind it. It's
I don't mind it.
I don't
It's
mind
all
it. It's
right.
just...
Like, I wouldn't call it a favorite. Really, the album, like, for me, like, as we get towards the back half, I'm a little tired of it, but I think the first 3 tracks
I don't know.
are
I
the
thought
best.
Maggot Dream was a great, like, next track to Terror by
I don't
Night.
love Maggot Dream, but I like it a lot, and I
just
think
thought it
that
was so beautiful.
its placement on the album is really nice.
Yeah.
Like, I think it works to the album's advantage as a whole. Unfortunately, Dark Hood comes after it, and I think the reason why Dark Hood isn't as effective is because each one of these tracks before it feels like Buckethead has taken an idea and he's exploring that one idea. Like on Land of the Lost, it's this really minimal guitar with a progressive electronic. On Maps of Impossible Worlds, it's that repetitive bit. On Terror by Night, it's that industrial vibe. Maggot Dream is that guitar solo. Dark Hood is like, you can't really think of one way to put it. It's just a bunch of ambient noises and some kind of uncohesive playing, and it never really amounts to like a full statement like the other songs do.
I kind of like, I don't know, I find it to be kind of explorative. Like, I don't, I kind of like how we're going from thing to thing. Normally, I wouldn't really like that at all. There's an instance on today's show where, like, I really despise that nature of one of the albums, or a section of one of the albums. But, here it's fine, honestly. Like, I thought it was a fine way to close the album. I don't really have any major complaints about it, except maybe that Dark Hood is a little too long, and that Maggot Dream is a little indistinct. And there are parts of Land of the Lost that are kind of middle of the road for me, but, like, I think it's realized. I don't think this is some sort of dream project or anything like that, or anything
it's
slaved
just a side
over.
project. Yeah, it's just a side project.
It's a B-sides, and for B-sides, I mean, yeah, it's pretty good, honestly.
This is a really solid album.
And what I think I like most about it compared to the other albums, as we'll get into it, is that it's scary for a different reason. It's like you have, as we'll talk about, this scary music, and then this is like atmosphere. And atmosphere, when it comes to creepy and setting a mood, goes a long way. And Buckethead, one of his strongest points is setting atmosphere. And we see that in spades on this album, for sure. Especially that opening track. It just fits the mood. You are in it immediately with that just bleak, like, sounds and atmosphere that he sets up in Land of the Lost. And it just carries over. So when Terror by Night hits and it actually gets crazy and scary, it's super effective.
It's like a death industrial track. And it's got guitar. Like, it's not... or worse, like... I love how he just manipulates the sound to make it almost indecipherable what he's actually doing,
I don't know if there's much more to say about this thing.
I'm feeling a light 8 on Dreamatorium.
Yeah, it's only 5 tracks long. It's a dark ambient record.
It's a breeze. It is a breeze, too.
Yeah,
if this
it's
was
a-
any
yeah,
longer...
It's like no issue, too. Like, it feels longer than it is, but not in a bad way.
It's like a little over 40 minutes long.
It's like 42 minutes.
Yeah. For me, this is like a decent 7. Like, I like it a lot. I don't quite love it because I don't think it ends nearly as well as it begins.
I'm rating higher because I have serious issues with the other albums that draw it back for me. So when I'm listening to this, it was a pleasant surprise compared to the others. And I think that's why I'm scoring a little higher than probably I would.
I do think Buckethead, his strengths are realized on this thing. And it doesn't feel like, just a bunch of throwaway tracks. It feels like there was some serious thought put into at least the first 3. Even if Maggot Dream is still really nice, it feels like, hey, let's do a Maggot Brain thing. The first 3 feel distinct, and they feel like only Buckethead could have made something like that,
The more I listen to Buckethead, the more impressed I become, the more I begin to enjoy his stuff. I think I'm checking out Electric Tears like sometime this week.
Oh, good. Good pick. Good pick to start with, too.
Yeah, I mean, like, even his B-sides are coming up above average. I think this is even better than, because it's more concise, this is better than Buckethead Land 2 by every merit.
Anything's better. For sure, anything's better than Buckethead Land 2. That album was purely for the hardcore fans.
I'm pretty much feeling like a strong 6 on Dreamatorium. It's a good set of B-sides. I don't see myself coming back. I'm never going to fall in love with this thing. But, I mean, it's
probably
cool.
Come back to it around Halloween time.
I'm glad they're out there, As far as scary, probably give this like a 4 out of 10 for scary, if we're going to do that.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10 for scary.
Yeah, like Terror by Night's the only scary track.
Yeah, it's really,
What would you
honestly,
give it?
could go even lower.
Like a 4 or 5 or whatever. It's kind of eerie, but I find it to be more relaxing than scary.
Honestly, just because it's really just Dark Hood and Terror by Night that I find to be like, these are kind of, like Terror by Night is flat out scary. Dark Hood is kind of just eerie, so I would maybe even go with like a decent to strong 3 on scary.
The album that I chose is by John Zorn, a alto saxophonist and jazz musician who has played in several different groups and has released a lot of different styles of music. The album that I have chosen is the 1990 release Naked City, which, to describe it, is like a mishmash of very avant-garde jazz. You've got your surf rock, you've got your lounge, you've got your cool jazz, you've got your grindcore, as is needed, as is necessary, of course.
Little spice of grindcore. A dash of grindcore.
A dash of Yamatsuka Ai is on this album. He is a member of Boredoms, which is a very experimental, noisy Japanese rock band that started out doing grindcore, which is basically like minute or shorter, like 20-second long sometimes songs. It's just usually like a massive amount of distortion and pummeling music with screaming over it. That's basically what the genre is. So you get some of that, and it's not always even distinct. Like, it'll be thrown into the middle of a song that is totally not like that sometimes on here. I think this album is super interesting and very enjoyable because of the energy it brings to the table. What do you two think about it?
I pretty much agree with that, except for I don't think I wouldn't use enjoyable for some of it. Some of it is, as someone who really gravitates towards stuff like this, like super crazy, especially like jazz and noise rock, which we get a little bit of on here, and that's like what my favorite songs on here are. Some of it's not that enjoyable, but there are some great tracks on here. This is a super, super inconsistent thing for me. We really bounce around on here. So like right off the bat, Batman, great track, awesome.
Hell yeah!
I literally just wrote, this rules. Like,
it's a cover of the Batman theme, and it's just, it like doesn't go crazy the same way, but it foreshadows it.
There's a James Bond theme song cover on here that is just
it's like right at the end too. I love that it's like we've gone through.
There's a Shot in the Dark cover here, which is actually we use the song Odd Numbers.
On A Shot in the Dark, you get the Batman theme again for a brief moment, and then the drum beat for Be My Baby comes in for like 10 seconds. I just think that's hilarious. Like,
that song is great.
It doesn't even stay there long, but like standard like R&B drum beat comes in for just a moment.
So to give a context of what this album sounds like, the song that is like the thesis statement is "You Will Be Shot."
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You have like that moment where it goes like, and just the alto sax John Zorn's playing, it makes this album.
Yeah, it's great throughout. Like, the sax is never really annoying.
Visceral. It is I have never heard sax played like this before.
You should get into free jazz.
I mean, I love jazz. I love all types of jazz.
No, I mean free jazz.
Free jazz. Oh.
Yeah.
I'm with Brian. This is such an inconsistent album.
Like,
front half, awesome.
Dude.
Back half, awesome. Middle half,
Great.
Pointless.
I really hate it.
From igneous ejaculation to
speedball is awful.
You do not need that because this album kind of like puts it all in the beginning with the crazy alto sax and the fast playing and the jazz and the grindcore elements. It's here throughout the album. No track doesn't have those elements in it.
Well, some of them don't. Some of them are like,
maybe Zygon Pickup.
No, there's songs on here that don't have like "I Want to Live" is like. Thank you.
Yeah, it's like a nice, cool
it's
jazz
like,
track.
Thank you. Like, we're right up, right after Snagglepuss. I'm hurting. So.
Okay, true.
Like, and really, that's
from track 10
Snagglepuss is fantastic.
When I like Snagglepuss, and when I reached Snagglepuss, I was like, this album is not so much about individual songs as it is
an experience.
Yes.
It sounds like.
Even though the songs can be picked out and stand apart from one another,
Jacob,
it really is
give
about...
us the general description that you give to us for this album.
I've described kind of the sound of it, but to talk about it compositionally...
No, I mean, describe the sound.
Well, the sound is just crazy. Like, it's like I said, you have avant-garde jazz, you have cool jazz, you have, like... There's a couple moments where there's, like, a little country interlude, like, instrumentally.
Yep.
It's all instrumental.
Big bang of...
You have a little bit of, like, no-wave, noise rock kind of vibes, and I think...
screaming from time to time.
Fred Frith of the band Art Bears. He part of like the rock in opposition movement of the 70s and 80s, which is like basically progressive rock-esque music that was trying to be as out there and weird as possible. And that kind of ethos is definitely present on this. A lot of these songs are less like structured like standard tunes. They're more just motifs that appear every now and then.
They feel a little improvised from time to time.
They do, and that's because they are. I mean, it's a jazz record.
Well, okay, so I'm just going to say what Jacob told us. This album sounds like this crazy guy who's like a performer, and he's funny, but if I don't laugh at his jokes, he's going to kill me.
Yeah, that's why I picked this album for the scary episode, because there are moments that are literally just funny, like the covers. It gets kind of Zappa-esque.
There's
musically.
a transition on Den of Sins about 33 seconds in that was like actually made me laugh. I wish I could recall specifically what happened, but there is like, I've just written here, ha ha ha, that transition at the 33-second mark. And I remember like when I was listening, it did make me like laugh out loud. Like I was legitimately.
So talking about what I was saying earlier, or why track 10 through 17 is just pointless. This album slogs.
That's a weird way to say the word great.
Here's what I wrote here. I wrote, Darwin from the Wild Thornberries drops in for a very quick verse, displaying technical prowess and a mastery of metaphors. I also put
Smashing.
This must be what Death Grips sounds like to people who hate Death Grips.
Yeah.
It's super patience testing.
Yeah. So,
like, man, it's really...
It's a bit of a slog, and it doesn't
It's like a
No,
3-minute slog.
it doesn't,
that is a
but
slog.
it doesn't need
You
to
sure?
be...
Is it not a decade long, that part of the album?
I think it's just exciting. I think...
Let me explain.
It's a great way to break up
10
the
through
sides.
17, it's just bam, 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 like 20-second, 13-second, shortest being 8 seconds. It's just so pointless, and it's just more of what we already know we're going to get. The crazy alto sax with the fast playing.
For me, it displays...
We get that through the first half and the back half of the album in spades, and it's great. What's this part doing here? It doesn't really add anything. It just feels so pointless.
It really displays the worst aspects of this music for me, because it's like, this is... Like, it's really just for them, and not in like a good way. I don't feel like, oh, okay, the band... Like, I don't think about like, well, how much fun did they have recording? I really don't, because I'm just so upset by what I'm hearing. Like, I really don't like it.
Because despite the fact that most of this album is insane, this feels like the album devolves, and I like that because of the feeling that you get throughout the entirety of it. I feel like this is the album at its core components without anything else added. Any of the other transitions, any of the other musical styles. You have Yamatsuka Ai, screaming, and then the insanity that's going on.
And he is really just screaming.
And he is just
There's
going
no
out
words. He is...
No, there might be.
Maybe. He's really
I don't think we could say
screaming.
him in this episode.
It's not like mixed per se.
I love that it devolves into this nonsense, and it doesn't last that long. And then it comes back with the song Chinatown, which is like a cool jazz tune. It brings us back to earth after going to hell for a few moments.
I don't think...
And I love that it just comes out of nowhere, and then it's gone relatively quickly. We get into probably the nicest, most beautiful little moment on the album, it adds to the sense of unpredictability on this thing, and I think it really
I really love
works.
the piano on Saigon Pickup. That's probably my favorite song on the whole album.
It's
Just
almost
the
here's the way I described it genre-wise, and it's the most hipstery avant jazzcore stadium rock. And then it turns into something that could have been played by the Meat Puppets. And then there's a dub and reggae section. That's a first for this album.
Yeah, I mean, I think Chinatown. I now that when you explain it that way, it's like, okay, that's kind of cool. I kind of like what they're doing structurally there.
But it still doesn't
I can't
improve
take the noise.
listening experience.
Honestly, I just can't take the noise, and that's weird because normally I'd be all about it. Like, I do like a bit of screaming, but like when it comes in here, I mean, man,
this album becomes so predictable, and I wish
thank
it didn't.
you, because like by the time we reach the end, the freakouts are getting pretty incessant. Like they're
I'm like, is there going to be a crazy alto sax screech in the next song?
Oh yeah, look at look, another grindcore breakdown. Like it really becomes.
So if the middle section was taken out, it wouldn't be as predictable because you have those slowdown moments more, happening.
I think that that's the core sound, and I think that I understand that that's in every track. I think that the tracks distinct themselves by the other things. Like, for example, Punk China Doll sounds like a punk rock song. The bass line sounds like Primus.
Drum production is flawless on that song, by
It
the
ends
way.
with an atmospheric section. The second song, NY Flat Top Box, is a country track that starts out with. Then you have Saigon Pickup. Then you have the James Bond theme. Then you have Den of Sins. And then you have Contempt, which is like the end of Purple Rain.
The back half is awesome.
All I'm saying is every track has the moments that make them stand out. And I don't ever feel like it becomes indistinct. Even if they all have that grindcore thing, I think it is unpredictable because of the other elements. Not the freakouts, but the fact that you have a reggae section in one of the tracks. The fact that you have the James Bond theme, like the other parts are what makes
ballsy
it
for
kind of wild.
music to come out like this in 1990. Holy crap!
Yeah, I've never listened to anything like this. This is my first, and this is a lot of people's. This is kind of like an internet music nerd core album that
I just love the term no wave. What a hipster thing.
They didn't like new wave, and they were in New York.
We didn't like new wave, so we're gonna call it no wave.
Yeah.
Wow, we're so cool.
I think once you listen to No Way, the sounds are pretty distinct.
No, I think it's funny, like,
right, because there's elements
or
of
anti-folk, things like we don't like this, so what are we gonna call it? How about no way? We're so edgy, I just think
There might have been a little bit of that in this. I
do think it's cool though, honestly.
But
and
for
like
this, it's a fun.
This is crazy.
The back half is great. Honestly.
Yeah, it is.
Like we have a few cuts in the beginning that are good. I actually think You Will Be Shot really
is my second favorite.
Really? I think it gets worse with each listen. Like it's
I just love that.
really it's all over the place. Like the more I listened to it, the more I was like, it's thrilling, but not in a way that I find super enjoyable. Like we're bounce everywhere.
This reminds me of...
But it is perfectly foreshadowed by the Sicilian Clan.
This is like the theme song to Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. I'm just imagining myself in the 50s with this crazy greaser-haired guy holding me hostage by a gun and just driving through L.A., holding the gun at me and just talking.
He's reciting his poetry at you that you have to say is good, and if you don't say it's good, you'll probably
So I like it, and I like it when I feel like that. It's just, there are moments where I'm like, okay... We get it.
I think that the reason why, this is a pretty relatively lengthy album at like 55 minutes. And, it does utilize a lot of the same structures. I think that the reason why it stays so interesting for me throughout is just the playing. I think that the instrumentally it's super good. And every time a little solo comes in, even if it's not the sax, the little guitar solos, the bass, I feel like every instrument has a time to shine on this. And it always...
This
super
would be
fun to
fantastic to watch live. It'd be awe-inspiring to watch this live.
It's extremely dense. Just thinking about all the tracks, we have some
26 tracks at 55 minutes.
Yeah,
it gets pretty crazy.
You said the reggae bits. There's some great noise rock-esque moments on here. The jazz kills it every time.
There's some rock and roll.
Yeah,
some classic with the James Bond.
The best track is Graveyard Shift. Damn, son. The second to last track, dude, that song is great.
It's like punk jazz, really.
Yeah, it's so good. I really wish the album was more like that. And maybe that's my flaw is when I'm listening to it, I'm kind of thinking, I wish we just had more of this part of the album. Because I think, a Saigon Pickup or a Graveyard Shift or a Contempt. Because, man, by the time we reach the end of Contempt, it's really, that song, blossoms. In the grossest way. In the same way that, a bloated giant corpse's stomach finally just releases all of its gore.
What?
He's not wrong.
Okay. That's an interesting analogy to choose.
It's really gross and like it's almost too crazy. And I really think it is because like we reach a point where it's like I don't know if I can even enjoy. Like we're almost at a performance art here, where it's like I don't. You don't think?
No, not at all.
I get a hint of that, and it's mainly in the middle half. It's really just that moment where I get a hint of that.
I think the music that's being played is interesting enough on its own. I don't think that it's a conceptual thing at all. I think the appeal is very visceral and very like I've listened to it 4 times, and every time I'm hearing new aspects to it that I hadn't heard before.
There is a lot to love about this, I will say. I'm thinking a Like a Decent 7
and
on
the
this.
thing is, this is out there musically, but I don't think it ever gets to a point where I'm questioning if it's music. Like I don't really see the
I don't
performance
get that
art
either.
aspect.
Oh well, I guess that's a poor way to put it. I just think it's like I get to a point where I don't question whether it's music or not. I just sort of I'm at a point where
Like if it's made for listening to.
yeah, I guess, or is this even intent? They put this out there; it's intended for an audience. I don't know. I find myself at war with really liking the tracks and thinking to myself like, this is just too much. And it's the first time I've ever felt like it's too much. I've really never thought that with music. Usually, I can handle just about anything that's thrown at
That
me.
was
But
me with On the Moon.
this is
much.
insane, man. Like this is absolutely crazy.
To me, like
It's-
I enjoyed it instantly. I never felt overwhelmed. Like I felt, I guess, overwhelmed in a good way, where I was really enjoying everything that was happening and surprised by certain things that were happening. But I never felt like it was too much to take in.
I think there's a majority of this album that's very good, honestly, but I really do despise the middle. Like, I don't want to drive it home too much because it's kind of just, it really is like a surface level. Like, I really hate how much noise there is. I really don't think it's necessary. I don't think, when you explain it, I kind of get the statement, but I don't know why we needed 3 minutes of it. And sure, 3 minutes isn't that long.
In the context of the album, it is.
It really feels like an eternity at that point, and I really hate listening to that part. And I'm not a huge fan of Chinatown as well, but I do pretty much.
That is your worst take of the life that you have lived thus far,
I pretty much love most.
and
of
that
the
will end very soon.
I love most of the back half. I think the closer's just decent.
Yeah, the closer isn't one of my favorites.
Yeah,
From
it
like
kind of
s-
ends kind of weak.
From Saigon Pickup to Graveyard Shift, I really don't have any complaints. James Bond theme is like peak music.
Nice.
I don't know. I feel like 2 types of ways about this. I just feel torn. I feel like, honestly, it is a bit of a mixed bag for me. I do get the idea of the album being kind of this, just ever so slightly like held together. You know what I mean? Like it's about to burst at the seams, and then when it does, it's too much, and really I can't help but feel that way. Honestly, with every single listen, I didn't find it to be, and I admire that to a degree. I didn't really find it to be any easier to digest. I just found that some moments became a little more predictable to me, but others stood out more as, musically very good. I don't know. I feel so torn. It's hard for me to even put a number on this thing. I almost more admire it than I like it. Like, I think someone should check this out.
It's worth listening to at least once. For sure.
I think it's worth listening to. I think it's got a lot of great ideas on it. I generally like this fusion of genres as well. The sensory overload's quite nice. There's a lot of songs that are very good, some that are great. I hate the middle a lot. And some tracks, like You Will Be Shocked and the middle of the album showed the worst of it.
Decent 8.
I would go with maybe a strong 6 or a light 7.
Oh, okay.
I just feel really at war with it, I don't hate it. It's like the hardest thing to digest that I've come, and it's weird because really when I look at this thing, I'm reminded of the Midori album that everyone, commonly known in meme communities as the Titty album. And it's a noise rock jazz. It's not nearly as insane as this. It's not even close. It's not even the same fucking country as this thing, but it's just so insane.
I think we broke him.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like, it's mind-bending. Maybe I'd come around to it the more I listen to it, because I could see myself going back, honestly.
What about on the scale of scary?
On a scale of scary, I don't know. It's just so, like, can we do, like, an insanity rating?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Change scary to insane.
Yeah, and this, like, I mean, a 12 out of 10 for insanity. It really is the craziest thing I've ever heard.
Wow.
I can't.
It's not the crazy. That's crazy.
I think that,
It's
something like
absolutely-
Trout Mask is crazier than this.
Sure, but this is, like, because there's not a lot of vocals here, but, like, I don't know. It's just insane, man.
I'm feeling a light to decent 7 on this, and on the scary, a 6. It has its moments where
Yeah,
I'm like,
sure.
wow, this is wild. But I think it's very fun. And there's a lot to love about it. I just think there's a lot holding it back for me to really enjoy it.
This thing is super intriguing, man. Like, it's like exhausting to listen. Like, every time I'm done, I'm like,
It makes me want to just look at more into this guy's catalog. It's kinda
I
crazy.
found this really easy to listen to. In fact, on my first listen, I found it surprisingly easy to listen to the point where I was like, wait, this is the album that everyone's been talking about? I expected something that was going to make me like turn around and walk away from it. Like, I expected this to be crazier on my first couple listens.
It's not-
I'm not
yeah.
even a huge avant-garde jazz, extreme music
you know, you had
kind
some
of guy.
context for this going in. Me, like, having never known about it, just being like, oh, it's another pick from Jacob. Like, it's kind of, it's obscure. I'm not trying to pigeonhole it because I think it's so much more. But like,
it's well known
obscure.
among certain music communities.
It's in circles, stuff like that. It's like the Midori album. It's like the average person has not heard of this. The average Brian has probably heard of this. I don't know, man. This thing is just insane. Like, it's one of the more intriguing ones we've done. I can't make heads or tails of it, honestly. Even with you explaining it, like, when I listen, I'm like, I can't tell if they're fucking around or if, like, this is like
I just love the
super...
performances on this thing, and I find this album to be just a whole boatload of fun. So it's decent 8 for me, and then on a scary scale, like a 6. There are moments for sure.
I think the Sicilian Clan's actually the scariest. Because
Yeah,
it's
it's
like
kind
just
of
super eerie.
I
It's,
think You Will Get Shot is the scariest because that says it all for me.
I love the title of that track.
That album cover is actually the scariest of the bunch too.
My notes of this don't even really describe. I love, first of all, every beach rock influence moment on here, 10 on 10.
love surf rock. That is one
like
of my
the
favorite
surf rock
genres of all time.
drums. I mean, man, they're flawless each time. I just like when I'm looking at my notes, like I can just remember like like I'm like gawking at this thing. I don't know. It's pretty insane. My pick was the 2018 return from a noise rock outfit called Daughters. Although I will say I'm not sure what they were doing before this album. I just kind of hopped on the hype train with this album last year. It's a lot of people's favorites. A lot of music nerds put it on, like we love to make lists. They, were quick to call it one of their favorites of all time. It received pretty high praise across the board as far as I'm aware. In a year that was full of amazing music. It's kind of an open-ended as far as interpretation goes kind of album, I think. But when this came out, me and Jacob talked about it because it blew up. Like it leaked, and we used this website called Rate Your Music where we kind of try to scout new releases because you can sort by genre. It's very nice, very like easy to sort through stuff and pick things out very particularly. So we saw this thing was like number 1 for 2018, and it wasn't even out yet. It had like leaked, and we were like, oh, we can't wait to hear this. And we heard it. So Jacob loved it instantly.
Yeah.
And I was and I loved it too. I thought it was great, but I was like, hold on. I was like, I feel like a lot of people are willing to overlook the flaws of this thing. It's kind of where I'm at on Denzel Curry's Taboo now. But the more I listened to it, I kind of got the urge to go back to it over the winter. And when I did, I was really happy I did because it only grew on me more, but it grew off Jacob.
Yep. This was at like a light 9 for me on first listen because I was amazed at the sound of this album. And it's still its strongest point. Nowadays, though, I really don't understand the universal acclaim for this thing. And the fact that people are praising it as one of the best noise rock, one of the best post-hardcore albums that they've ever heard. I think it has some pretty major flaws. And I still very much like this album, but I've listened to it 5 times, and every time I listen to it, when I try to dig into it, and I hope that there's more to it, there never ends up being that, really.
So I'm
You hate it.
well, hold on. I'm kind of in a special case where this is a genre I barely know anything about. Most I know is what I've heard from this show, with Deceit and other picks you guys have done.
Dang, that sucks because I think this isn't like a terrible, I think this is a fine way to get into it. This makes me want to listen to more noise rock. This gets me excited to listen to Big Black.
What I'm saying is, so I didn't know what to expect.
Right.
And I'm as fresh as they come to rate this album, to say what I think about it. It is overhyped. This is so overhyped that I can't understand why people are so over this thing. Because, okay, I'm going to go and say what my scary rating is. This is an 8 out of 10 scary-wise. It literally made me uncomfortable. I have not been this uncomfortable listening to an album since I listened to Buckethead Land 2 for the first time. And that album made me really uncomfortable, for many reasons. When City Song hits and that drum beat happens,
huge.
I was terrified. I didn't want to I wanted to take off my headphones and just go for a walk. And put on some Andrew WK. I was so terrified. It just
He'll get you through, man.
yeah. I needed some motivation. And then that was through the whole album. So once I got that out of the way, I was like, okay, this is a freaky ass album. Let's just listen to it lyrically, musically, and see what there is to take apart. There isn't much to it. It's like the tones of the guitar are pretty interesting. That riff on Sailing the Way is fantastic. The keyboard moment in Daughter is pretty cool. And the last 40 minutes of Guest House is beautiful. But this guy's vocals is so annoying and pretentious and monotone. It just really ruins it for me. Especially, like City Song, I kind of like it, especially at the end of it when it's just his vocals. That just gives me shivers. But then Long Road No Turns hit. A little on all it take. Oh, and he repeats it over and over, and it's like he totally thinks he is scary and has this terrifying presence and is really like saying this just horrible thing, and it just comes off as gimmicky.
I do.
That is
partially,
the
but not
perfect
fully.
word. Sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you there. That is the perfect word for it. Sometimes his singing is a little gimmicky.
Mm-hmm. I love the "a little is all it takes" bit though. I think it's pretty catchy and memorable.
The only time when he repeats lyrics that it really hits the home run for me is in Daughter. When he repeats that line over and over, I feel it. I really feel it. So then we get into Staying in the Wait. Probably I want to say my favorite song on the album.
Yeah, that's easily my favorite.
That riff just...
The chiming guitars, they sound like a Glenn Branca kind of thing. Overall, the whole sound of this album is like, you take the Jesus Lizard, you throw in just a touch of... A dash of Sonic Youth, and then you throw in another dash of Glenn Branca.
I think
it's more post-hardcore songwriting-wise than it is noise rock, even though it's 100% noise rock, like the sound of the album and the way that it sounds sonically, the guitars, I would say, the drumming is very post-hardcore, and the songwriting style is very post-hardcore.
So then the album picks up for me with Flammable Man and the Lord Song. I feel like the whole album should have been these two songs, especially the Flammable Man. The Flammable Man is when I'm like scared, but I'm also like, yeah, I want to...
It's like a swarm of bees.
I want to headbang. I want to get into the sound.
Man, that breakdown in the middle never fails. Like, it really just stops all thought. It's pretty overpowering.
Like
I think the Lord Song is like is a moment on here for me that's okay. It's good. It's not great.
I'm not a huge fan of the vocals or the lyrics on that song.
The lyrics really let me down there.
The lyrics are just like, oh man, religion.
Lyrically,
I don't like it.
This album is so... The potential is there, and they don't take it lyrically for this project
I disagree with that. I think lyrically there are a lot of great moments on here.
Moments maybe, but just God bless. Just
throughout, you don't like Satan in the Wait is pretty...
That's the
consistent.
best one by far.
Yeah.
It is, but that's it.
But not really. Like, I think Less Sex is... And that is a huge point of contention
We'll get
between
to
the
Less
three
Sex
of us.
in a
Y'all
minute.
are straight up wrong, man. That song is fantastic.
I think lyrically Daughter is pretty strong.
That's
the
my
Reason They
least
Hate Me is
favorite.
okay. Guest House lyrically is pretty stellar.
Guest House is like chilling, honestly. Like when
It reminds me of the end of Spiderland with Good Morning Captain.
When it starts though, but like whereas in Good Morning Captain we build to that point of release and it's like kind of shocking. It's like, oh my god, it's like, you're kind of really building up to it. Here, it's chilling, but like it's just so instant and loud.
See, that's the thing. This album has quiet moments. I don't think it should have had quiet moments. I think this should have just been a blood-pumping, kept it at 100 the whole time.
I don't know. I would die of 50 minutes. Like, if it weren't for, like, Less Sex and Daughter,
I think
which
you
are
could take
kind
a
of...
couple tracks out.
You really could. Like Less Sex.
Take out the worst song through Daughter.
Take out Daughter and take out, for me, Lord
really
Song.
You just didn't like Daughter? I love that keyboard. It sounds like boss.
Dude,
I've heard that
music.
track 5 times. I can't remember it.
I literally don't know
Wow.
what it sounds like, Chaz. I don't
That's
know what it
crazy,
sounds like.
because I think it's one of the better
Like, I think if you
songs
took
on
it out, if you get Less Sex and The Reason They Hate Me, like, this thing would honestly get, like, such a huge
Get
boost in
Flammable
score.
Man into The Reason They Hate Me. Just take out the whole Lord Song, Less Sex, and Daughter. Take all
I
of them
would
out.
keep Less Sex, even just as a
No.
cool down.
No.
The thing is, I actually think the sound, like the guitars on Less Sex, are produced fantastically. The way they pierce in on the chorus.
Dude, I was gonna flip if you said they were
They
bad.
are
I
great.
love the wall. You don't love the like. It's the chorus is the sound of those guitars, and
the
for me,
sound,
it
and
is.
that's the best thing about this album.
Yeah.
Is the sound, but it only carries it so far. The songwriting is probably the biggest flaw of this album. It's very repetitive, and the thing is, I'm okay with repetition as long as it's warranted. And the sound is great, but it's just not great enough
Yes.
to warrant the songwriting. There's only a couple courses. Satan the Wait with those high-pitched guitars, very Glenn Branca-esque. The best thing about the album is that chorus. It's the one of the few choruses that I can remember. And the Flammable Man, it has that intense breakdown. That's a different structural moment on this album that is distinct.
That's the
Long
biggest
Road
thing
No
structure.
Its structure is so one note.
I need to rant about Less Sex because this is such a whiplash moment in the album for me because we get Flammable Man, the Lord song, and I'm getting really high on this, and then Less Sex just tanks off a goddamn cliff. Brian, I know you like this song. I don't really give a shit that you like this song.
Say your piece and I'll defend because I really feel strongly about this.
Okay. The reason I didn't like Elbow so much is that it had moments of like that.
You fucking dig a grave with my hands.
Yeah.
Like,
I am not a fan of that like bayou guttural like you know what I mean? I don't know what to call
like
that.
those like you think they're cheesy.
Like,
you
let
think,
a long way down.
that's like bluesy.
I'm not a fan of it because when it's done right, it's done really good.
I just don't think you. I think you think the
only
harmonies.
time I liked it a lot was in Zeal and Ardor. That fit. I liked it. It didn't feel gimmicky. There, it just sounds like edgy iTunes Apple commercial music. Like I could see that song playing and then have like people driving a truck, a truck commercial or like they're in the Apple, like, it just sounds like that. I hate it. I hate it so much. It's such a puzzling moment in the album. Like, okay, we're building the sound. We have these like city song, whether you like it or not, Long Road, it still makes me chill. I am chilled. I am scared of this album. And then Less Sex hit. I'm like, what? What?
I don't think the mood is very convincing, really. I feel like...
And especially when that song hits, it's like, I'm immersed, and then you totally took me out of
I don't think the
immersion.
vocalist is good enough to carry it either.
And that monotone really gets annoying on that song.
I don't feel like he has enough charisma to where when the songwriting isn't as great as it can be, the tracks just kind of feel like run-of-the-mill songwriting-wise. Yes, the guitars can still sound incredible, and the drums can still sound great.
Are killer.
Just the whole sound design of this album is amazing.
And the album picks up for me personally with Daughter and The Reason They Hate Me, but the damage that Less Sex has done for the immersion and experience of this album is so bad that it just never picks back up to where
think Daughter
the
is
Flammable Man did for me. Because the Flammable Man is the peak for me.
That's crazy that you like Daughter that much because that song is so indistinct. Don't care. Don't really.
Keyboard it's so cool when it.
Dude, the keyboards on The Reason They Hate, or I'm sorry, the guitars on The Reason They Hate Me are so much more memorable. Like just off the top of my head.
Not really. No.
Are you sure?
I agree with Brian on this one.
That's fair.
I think the last 3 tracks of this album are actually really solid.
I mean, yeah, 8
Ocean
to
Song
10.
is pretty wild. I always feel like that song, for some reason in my head, that song is always like 12 minutes. It's really long, but like, man, there's some, like sonically, it's maybe not one of my favorites.
It builds.
I'm glad that
it
this
actually changes over time.
Yep.
I'm glad
builds.
this album doesn't slog for me, because if it slogged, then we'd really be in trouble, especially with Less Sex.
I can't believe Less Sex hurts it, because you really haven't even complained about some of these songs. Like Long Run Returns and Less Sex are the only ones you really dislike.
This is a Minutemen situation to me where I respect the hell out of what this album's doing. It's just I don't like the sound. Not a fan, but I like what it's doing, and I like it enough to where I'm enjoying myself. I'm scared, I'm terrified, I'm wondering where this album's going to do next. So when Less Sex hits, it's like, what? Why?
I think it's killer, man.
That is the most gimmicky part of the album.
Like, honestly, coming out of the Lord's song, like, I'm really glad we get a Less Sex, because one, up to this point, we've been hit in the head, like, just decimated by these, like, it's relentless. And the guitars aren't always there to kind of, like, on Satan in the Wait, because they're certainly not there on Lord's song or Flammable Man.
They didn't do it right then. They should have done they could have done a slowdown moment in a much better way. Like, I want more of those riffs from Satan in the Wake. Like, that could have been a slowdown moment with more of like a beautiful...
More of like a beautiful thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think I don't think Less Sex is like... I think it's the best song here. I don't think it's the scariest, but I think it's my favorite for creating a mood, because like... I agree that he's not super charismatic, and sometimes I really don't like the vocal delivery. Like, I think on Long Road No Turns, except for the bits you mentioned, like, outside of the really quotable moments, I guess I would call them, like, there's not a lot there going on for me. The Lord's song is just kind of like, I do like the screaming quite a bit. I like the repetitive, intensity of that song, but also, like, lyrically, there's nothing going on there, and that's when it falls apart for me, is when lyrically I'm not getting a lot out of it, which is few and far between. Like, it's really only Daughter and Lord's song where I'm not getting a lot out of it there. I do think his performances leave something to be desired sometimes. Like he sounds strange on top of some of these instrumentals at first, but once I get used to it, it's not too out of place, but I do get that. But with Less Sex, how quietly, he's just repeating these lines. It's very basic to me. It's a similar feeling to Is It Cold in the Water. I would compare it to that song because I think it's as good, or at least like 90% as good as that song, honestly, because it's such a simple motif. It's like, okay, how can I simply describe kind of becoming a worse person? And it's like, well, you let it happen, right? You just kind of don't perform maintenance on yourself to be a better person. And you just take that and you put into, I let it into my home. I let it into my head. I let it in from the cold. I know it's repetitive, but I don't care because I just love that quiet, broken man that we get on this song. You know, it's like, I let this happen to me. It's my fault. Horrid wash of guitars. Just like this, just bleak realization. And that's for me why the song is so amazing. It just really is like perfect at capturing that atmosphere. I don't mind the little because I think it just sounds good. I think it definitely sounds like it belongs here, but between the huge wash of guitars and the chorus, maybe like in the verses it doesn't, but that's because we're getting a moment. I think it's very smartly placed because we're over halfway through it's like right after the halfway point, it's like, okay, dial it back a bit because we've been through a lot. Like at that point, like if you recall that the chorus of Satan the Weight is not nearly as forgiving as the verses of that song. The verses are pummeling. Like, I mean, just be like, and we're like City Song and Long Road No Returns are the same way. Like the drums are loud, man. They're so loud, and I don't mind them. I like them. I think they're great at points. But like, we really need a cool down. And not only do they like nail it, but they have a song that like rivals some of my favorite songs we've covered on the show before. Honestly, like, and it's weird because when this came out, that was one of the songs I was like, I'm not really as into it. But the more I listen to it, it really just creeps into my like being, and like I can't get it out of my head. And it has like it's probably my favorite vocal performance on the whole album because it's so understated in a world of Let Me In and Ocean Song and City Song's like weird like poetry, and Satan in the Wait's like, and Reason They Hate Me is more typical structures but still very memorable refrains. It just sticks out so well because there's no real uniting. The only real uniting thing is the beginning of the line, but I just love the different context we get in each verse, and I could listen to those guitars all day. I just have very few complaints, and it's only grown on me since, and I just really, really enjoy it. And I think there's a little bit of a personal thing here where it's like, this came out in the year where I was really getting into music, and it was a great year for music. I got really lucky with my timing. And, I remember it as one of the best of those, of all the albums from last year that I was listening to. Like, I'll identify with a lot of them because I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. Like, that was right when I was getting into music, and like, they were great, and like, there was so much great stuff that year. It's just a really positive feeling. I mean, like a light 9, man. Like, this thing is just grown on me so much. Even with the song as forgettable and long as Daughter. And I think by the end as well, it becomes a bit incessant. Even though Guest House is great, by the time we arrive, I am kind of thinking to myself, like, okay, like, this has been a lot. It's not an experience I'm doing, twice a week or anything.
To me, I feel like this album is a little bit of a one-trick pony. And I enjoyed it a whole lot on first listen because that trick really captured me. Like, I adore the way this album sounds. And the songwriting here, for the most part, I wouldn't ever really call it bad, and it's great on occasion. Like Satan in the Wait, Flammable Man, Ocean Song, and Guest House. I'd say those are my 4 favorite tracks on this album. But I feel like most of these songs just accomplish the same thing that the last track did, and when it tries to do something different, like on Less Sex, I still like it sonically, but I feel like their songwriting isn't great. A lot of these, I've listened to this album 5-6 times, I just can hardly remember most of these songs here. Like, it's so one note and one dimensional, even lyrically, I'd say most of the time. Lyrically, there's only maybe just Satan in the Wait where I feel like the lyrics are something special. A lot of the time, I feel like the lyrics are just really typical dark lyrics. And I never feel like there's a lot that is explored through them. Sometimes they can be, visceral and angry, like A Little Is All It Takes and Let Me In. Like, those are some good moments, and those are some lines that you can remember. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, the lyrics I feel like are just okay, and the songwriting I feel like is decent to great on occasion. So I'm going to give this like a decent 7. I still really like it. I still think it's a really good album. Definitely do not think that it's one of the best noise rock or post-hardcore albums I've heard, and it's certainly not anything new. I don't know if that's part of what the acclaim has been, but I feel like these sounds I think what Daughters is doing, they're taking these sounds and they're meshing them together, but the individual sounds, like the sound of the guitars is very Glenn Branca, and he was doing stuff back in the late 70s, early 80s. And the songwriting style, I think, has been done much better by bands like the Jesus Lizard. So, Daughters, I'd recommend it. I think it's a really good album. I don't think it's great.
What would you guys give it on the Scary?
Scary, like a 5. I never felt scared by this.
Yeah, and I could get that as well, because I still don't really... I get that really only from, like, 2 songs. It's like
I just don't... I think it's the vocalist for me. He never... Like, only on a couple tracks, like Guest House and Long Road No Turns, and maybe the first track is very ominous.
Yeah, I would agree. City Song, Guest House, and Less Sex, not so much Fear. I don't really love that song because it makes me scared, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's really just those two. Like, Scary, I mean, like, really, honestly, Zorn is scarier in retrospect. Like a light 4 on Scary, honestly.
8 out of 10 on the Scary, because I was actually very uncomfortable while listening to this. Strong 6. I don't get the hype. I don't get why everyone loves it. There's a lot to like about it, but there's not enough to really warrant all the praise that it gets. And track 6 just really brings it down for me. And the front half is way better than the second half, except I do like Daughter a lot. I like that keyboard so much. If there was more moments like that, and the riff in Saint in the Wait, and the end of Guest House, this would be a much better album, in my opinion.
We all lived. We all made it.
This is the maddest I've ever been. I haven't been this mad since Elbow, honestly. And I'm madder in retrospect about Elbow.
Next episode, we are going to be having a guest in Tanner Boyd, who also is here at Morehead State Public Radio. It's going to be a regular episode, and the album that I have chosen is the 2014 release by Sun Kill Moon, Benji.
The 2014 self-titled album from experimental hip-hop trio, Clipping.
I will be doing Selected Ambient Works Volume 2, the 1994 release by Aphex Twin, a electric artist that is one of my favorites and is one I wanted to talk about on this show for quite a while.
I'm Jacob Lindberg. I have been here with Chaz Jenkins.
Hello.
And Brian Courtney.
I let Chaz into the studio.
And we will return next time for more of Unwarranted Music Opinions.
Let a long wait.